Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I see Melissa Irons has logged on and Carolyn Maxwell, Colby Goodman, welcome. So glad you're here. Fantastic. All kinds of people are logging on and it's great to see your names. Alex Schreier, Andrew Hedren, Michael and Palmer, welcome. Jennifer Tennyson from PWB, the vice chair there. Fantastic. So glad you're here today. Amy Eklund, Allison Scott. Fantastic. Names I recognize. This is exciting. I'll give everybody just a minute or so to come and join us. But thank you so much to all of those who have come and logged on already. Yeah, Melissa Iron says, looking forward to today's fireside chat. Thank you, Ari, for joining us. And yeah, we do have a great guest. We're really looking forward to hearing everything he has to share with us. Well, great. We have a lot to cover, so I think I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jennifer VanderBeken with VanderBeken Remodel, and I am your 2021 Remodelers Chair. I, along with our council's vice chair, Melissa Irons, we welcome you to today's webinar, and we are really glad that you've taken the time to join us today. So we have an open chat and would love for you to participate, comment, just chat. We also have a question and answer option for questions for our speaker, Ari Weinzweig. Our format today is a little bit different, as Melissa mentioned. It's a little bit of a fireside chat, a little bit of an interview, a little bit of a just everything, very conversational interview. So your questions will be a big part of that. So to warm up, please go ahead and chat in your name. And after all, it's fun to see who's out there Zooming with us, your company, and be sure to include an NAHB designation that you hold. So let's see, so name, company name, and if you have an NAHB designation, like to celebrate what those designations mean, the commitment to the industry and the hard work behind them. Good deal. And Katrina has already put in a few housekeeping notes, which is fantastic. So great. Fantastic. All right, as those keep rolling in, I'm going to read our mission statement for our Remodelers Council. The Remodelers Council is a fellowship of remodelers and associates that share their acquired industry knowledge and business practices, promote the general welfare of their membership, and sustain participation in impacts through membership, education, and service. So at this point, I'd like to thank, we have a lot of new members to the RC, and it's pretty amazing that even while we're not able to meet in person, these companies are investing in being a part of the council. So Estate Homes, Empire Construction Incorporated, Gravitate Design Build, JBS Painting and Design, Master Electric Company Incorporated, B. Brooks Interiors, Southworthy Builders, RHH Construction, West Hill Incorporated, Neil Kelly Company, The Flood Guys, Avid Builders Incorporated, Tennyson Home Construction Incorporated, and SYI Development. And a fair amount of these new members actually put in projects into the T-Rex Awards, which is fabulous. So welcome. So this year has been filled with amazing virtual events and speakers, yet we have more to come. So stay tuned and watch for updates on the events page or in our weekly Imbax e-newsletter for event information. If you haven't had the chance to take a look at and maybe print out the handout that Nicole emailed out yesterday, Mara, one of Ari's team members, she has put that in the, I think she will be putting that in the chat, a link to the PDF, just in case you haven't done that. So it's a handout that they provided which includes a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So our next webinar will be on May 20th with Jackie Shaw. Jackie is a financial extraordinaire, and the topic, as you can see, will be budgets and how to forecast, track, and adapt. In fact, law number 3 of the 12 natural laws of business that we'll be talking with Ari today is without good finance, you fail. So join us for that. So Rex is happening. The annual Rex T-Rex Awards will be once again virtual and on June 12th at 6:30 p.m. So be sure to register. I've heard there are some pretty fabulous projects, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them, as I'm sure you are as well. We also have a new event that we would love to invite you to and for you to attend. It's called Coffee and Chat. It's a casual, laid-back hour or so network event coming up next Thursday, April 29th at 7 a.m. So bring your coffee and come chat with people in the industry. If you're interested, reach out to Nicole early for the Zoom link and calendar invite. So this webinar is made possible by some fantastic sponsors, and we would like to invite them to say a few words. I'd like to introduce Craig Ball, the Business Development Manager here at Imbax, who will be introducing each of today's sponsors. Craig.
Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm Craig Ball, Business Development Manager. My goal for this particular event is not to go in a coughing fit based on all the allergens floating around out there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ashley Day with Earn West. Ashley, would you like to say a few words to the group?
Hi, welcome, and thanks for having me. Earn West is short for Employer Resources Northwest, and we are the program administrator for the GRIP Retro program for your refunds on the premiums that you pay into your workers' comp. So if you aren't already participating in this program, I highly encourage you to do so. As Craig has up on the screen here, we have earned some really good refunds for the participating members, and we enjoy working with you.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Next up, we'd like to welcome a new sponsor of these events for this year, Trex, and representing Trex is Max Shoe. Max, please say a few words. Oh, Max, I think you're on mute. Are we there, Max? Well, I think we may have to come back, and this could be an audio issue on my side. We'll come back to Max if possible. It's rather busy out there, and of course the sunny weather is probably not helping it. And unfortunately, we've got a number of sponsors that won't be in attendance today. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank KDL Enterprises, representing Western Clearview Skylights, and ask that you visit Dunn Lumber, as they have a nice selection of KDL's products. Also, I'd like to thank Milgard Windows and Doors. I had a recent experience where my Milgard windows, which I had installed 20 years ago, one of them failed. And as a consumer, I made a simple phone call, and under warranty, incredible service. They came right out and fixed it right away. So I would think that if on the trade side that Milgard demonstrates that kind of exemplary customer service, I would simply not hesitate to give them a referral and a reference. And lastly, I'd like to thank Velux. Jeff Chase is unfortunately unable to make it here today, but he would like to once again thank everyone for contributing to Velux's phenomenal first quarter. And he asks that you to remember Dunn Lumber when considering your various Velux products. And Max, are you able to get on with audio? Well, I think we'll have to move on. Up to you, Jennifer. Take it away.
Thanks, Craig. Yes, technology. It's a beautiful and crazy thing. So thank you, Craig, and thank you to all of our sponsors. Really appreciate your support. So today we have a great webinar planned. We have an amazing guest. Ari Weinzweig is here with us today. So besides being the co-founder of Zingerman's Delicatessen and a nationally renowned food icon, Ari is actively engaged in day-to-day operations and governance of nearly every business in the Zingerman's community, and also a prolific writer. Ari regularly travels across the world on behalf of Zing Train, teaching organizations and businesses about Zingerman's approach to business. A sought-after keynote speaker, he has delivered keynotes for Inc. 500, Microsoft Expo Spring Conference, Great Game of Business Gathering of Games, Positive Business Conference at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, American Society for Quality, and the American Cheese Society. One of Zingerman's guiding principles is being an active part of the community. In 1988, Zingerman's was instrumental in the founding of Food Gatherers, a food rescue program that delivers over 5 million pounds of food each year to the hungry residents of Washtenaw County. Every year, Zingerman's donates 10% of its previous year's profits to local communities, community organizations, and nonprofits. Over the decades, Zingerman's founding partners have been recognized by a variety of organizations. In April 1995, founders Ari and Paul Saginaw were awarded the Jewish Federation of Washtenaw County's first humanitarian award. Ari has also been recognized as one of Who's Who of Food and Beverage in America by the James Beard Foundation, and was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Bon Appetit Magazine and the American Cheese Society. Ari's book, quote, Building a Great Business, unquote, was an Inc. magazine's list of best books for business leaders. So Ari, it is our privilege to have you here today. Would you please join me? Hi.
Thank you. I always get nervous after you read all that nice
Quite
stuff.
an introduction. So, well, thank you for being with us today. So first and foremost, could you please tell us your background and how you embarked in business?
Absolutely. It's not a textbook business school story. I grew up in Chicago. I came to Ann Arbor, which if people aren't familiar with it, because y'all are all the way out west there, is about a 4-hour drive to the east of Chicago and about an hour west of Detroit, so on I-94 in between. I came here to go to school. I studied Russian history. I particularly, as Jennifer already knows from reading, studied the Anarchist, which we can talk about or not, as you like. And after graduating from U of M, University of Michigan, with my history degree. Of course, there isn't really anything you could do with a history degree except go back and get more degrees, which is what I was supposed to do. And we're going to talk about vision a bit today. But when I graduated, I really had no vision whatsoever. I had only what David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E, the poet and writer who comes from the UK, but actually lives out by you all, I think on Whidbey Island out there. He calls it the via negativa. That's where you're clueless about where you want to go, but you're really clear where you do not want to go. And I wouldn't recommend that as a great life course, but it's better than nothing because at least you could eliminate some of the options. And I knew I did not want to go back home. Nothing against my family. It was just a little too close for comfort. And so I decided I would stay in Ann Arbor, which I now love. At the time, it was just sort of okay, and I didn't know where else to go. But anyway, I needed a job, and I had driven a cab while I was in school, which was fine, but not all that glamorous. And one of my roommates was waiting tables at a restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor, which is, of course, it's a small town, so only like 12 minutes from the edge of Ann Arbor. And I went in there, applied for a job as a server. They interviewed me very nicely, said they would call me if something were to open up. I waited a couple of weeks or so. They hadn't called me, so I went back thinking I'll reapply as a busboy, see if they hire me for that. Same thing happened. I waited 2 more weeks. I was about to run out of money. Rent was coming due, so I went back and offered to do anything, and they offered me a job washing dishes, which I didn't know you weren't really supposed to want to take those jobs, but so I just said yes, and that's how I got started. So I got zero glamorous story about, you know, a lifetime of dreaming of opening my own business. Everybody in my family were teachers, doctors, lawyers, dentists, psychologists. So I was kind of the failure of the family for a long time because I didn't go back to get an advanced degree. And I had no culinary interest particularly other than any other human who likes to eat, but I grew up on Kraft macaroni and cheese. Green Jello with pears was my mom's top dessert. Mrs. Paul's fish stick, Pop-Tarts, Tang, Nestle's Quick, and a whole host of other wonderful industrial foods. And so I really just lucked out. I mean, I came to love food and cooking and the food business. I still cook every night at home. And I met great people. So Paul Saginaw, who's been my partner in all this from the beginning, which is now, we just celebrated our 39th anniversary. Last year, we got a pandemic for our anniversary. That wasn't so great, but on March 15th. But anyway, he was the general manager, and that's how we met. So I worked for that restaurant group for about 4 years, prepping, line cooking, and then the last couple of years managing kitchens, which is where I first started to get into leadership roles, which we'll talk about. And in fall '81, which seems like forever ago, not quite 1918, but I guess it's the inverse of 1918. 1981, November 1, I just decided I was done. Like, I didn't hate my job, but it was not really rewarding in the way that I really intuitively knew I wanted my life to be. And so I just decided it was time to move on. There was no malice. I didn't hate going to work, and I gave 2 months notice, unsure of what would be next. And Paul, not knowing I had given notice, he had opened a little fish market here in town, which, you know, it's hard to believe out west on the coast, but it's actually one of the best in the country. And he called me like 2 days later, and he had grown up in Detroit where you could get good deli food. And in Chicago, as I said, where I grew up, you could get it, but you couldn't get it here. And somehow within like a week, we decided we were going to open. And somehow 4.5 months later, we were open. So March 15th, 1982.
Wow. Well, and if you look on the packet, the handout, the second page,
Candyland.
yes, this is an amazing map of businesses. And I think something I forgot to mention was that you have Mara here from your team, who's here to help with any links and any extra information. So thank you, Mara, for joining us as well. Appreciate it. When I look at the current state of Zingerman's on this page in the handout, it's an amazing amount of individuals, or an amazing amount of businesses, which represents, in effect, an amazing amount of individuals and families that are impacted by what you've helped create. So can you give us you talked about the beginning, but then how did we get here?
Yeah. Well, one day I woke up and it was like Kansas, and no. So when we opened back in 1982, the original space, since y'all are builders, the building was built in 1902, because just builder anecdotes. So because there was no zoning board of appeals, of course, in those days, the little house that had been on the corner, they just moved with winches and horses and moved to the back of the lot where it still stands and now is part of a historic placement. The building was built for, I think, under $12,000 in under 3 months. It's
Wow.
2-story red brick building, like I said, 1,300 square foot footprint. And anyway, so we just had me and Paul and 2 employees. I mean, it's a pretty small space. You could see everything from everywhere. And that's kind of how we got going. And we're going to talk about vision a little bit, but the first natural law on the list, I guess I could just start mentioning so people can have the workbook. But
Absolutely.
The first natural law of business is that any successful organization, business, not-for-profit, and I would suggest human being, and I don't necessarily mean the ones making the most money, but the ones who are living the life of their choosing, have a vision. Now, they might not write it down the way we can talk about how we now do it here. And Paul and I certainly didn't write it down in 1982 when we had 2 employees, but in our heads, we had one. And I would suggest this is no different than a parent of young children has a vision, even though they don't say it out loud every day, of what their relationship with their child will be like when the child is an adult. It helps you hold course when you want to kill them because you'll never get to your vision. But anyway, we had one in our heads. And as a history major, I can essentially say that we knew from the beginning we wanted to have a very unique place. I wrote a pamphlet called The Art of Business, which is my belief that business and life are like art or music or poetry or whatever, and that the more we can create a business that's an expression of who we are
Mhm.
as individuals and what our values are, what our beliefs are, basically what our art is really important. So we didn't want to be a copy of something from New York or LA or whatever. We wanted to create our own space. We wanted great food, great service, and a great place for people to work, and we knew that. And from the beginning, we only wanted one. It's not a judgment of others who have different models of growth, but my experience of the food business was when you went to the 6th, 8th, 12th unit of the same place, it was never that interesting. It might have been convenient for the people who lived near it, but when you went to the first one, it's always special. And I mean, I'll use Starbucks as an example because you're out in that part of the world, but the original Starbucks is still way more energetic than if I were to stop at one on the Ohio Turnpike driving from here to Cleveland. It might be convenient and they got a bathroom and that's awesome. But beyond that, I don't think anybody walks in there and goes, wow, this is incredible. And we really wanted that to be our business, to be a special experience that people would remember. So that's how we got going. At the time we started, I will say that most of the town thought we would be out of business within a year. The food business is notorious for that. I think the data is like 85% close within 12 to 18 months. The town had 10, 12 delis close in the previous decade. So everybody was sort of, the common wisdom was we would never make it. People told us it was a bad neighborhood and we were making a really stupid location decision. And anybody who's been there will know there's still no parking to this day. So pretty much we were doomed. 5, 6, 7 years later, it turned out we were geniuses. Turned out Ann Arbor always needed a deli, and it turned out to be a perfect location. This pattern, I will say, has been repeated with most everything that we have done, and I think really with most everything meaningful that anybody does. If you're pursuing your own path, mostly people won't like it in the beginning. But anyway, fast forwarding from there, we added on, in your building context, we added on to the building in 1986, and then we renovated the 1860s house next door in 1991, which gave us more seating space. And we're in the historic district there too. So it meant basically keeping the shell, but putting out new wood and a new foundation, everything into the building to retain the exterior integrity. And
Right.
you all are familiar with this, I'm sure. And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
so that was sort of how far we got. And then in 1993, so this is 12 years in, to your point about the little map in the workbook. I
Mhm.
mean, we probably had about 150 employees or so. And Paul sat me down in front of the deli one morning about 10 o'clock mid-morning, which if anybody's worked in the food business, and I know somebody said they were a dishwasher, that you should be getting in there, getting your butt in gear to get yourself ready for your lunch rush that's coming. And he sits me down when I needed to be like hustling and getting ready. And he kind of looked at me and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? And I kind of looked at him like, what? He's like, in 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, Paul, like, I don't know. Like, I got work to do. And he's like, no, this is our work. And he sort of unloaded what in hindsight was probably 3 or 4 months of not being able to sleep, worrying about it. And in essence, what he was asking me is, what's your vision?
Mhm.
And he had an intuitive sense, I guess, that we had achieved what I would now call organizational midlife.
Okay.
It's kind of like this stage where whatever metaphorically works in your life, you got the college degree that people said you couldn't get. Your kids finally moved out of the house, and you're like, but your life's not over. And you
Right.
realize there's now a whole nother place. I run, so I compare it to running in San Francisco. At Seattle actually could compete, but you run a hill and I'm like, I can do it, I could do it. And I get to the top, I'm like, oh my God, there's 7 more hills now. We do.
Yes.
And it was a little like that. So that's really the first time that we ended up engaging with the visioning process that we now use so extensively. And I can talk more about that, but
Yeah,
out of
what
that,
is that vision process? Because I think and I think if I remember right, when we were speaking earlier, you referred to that visions, you have an overarching, but then they
yeah,
also can ebb and
yep.
flow.
Yep. So this is well, out of that initial question, we spent a year of long walks, long talks, lots of swearing, eye rolling, and continually coming back to the table till we agreed on the answer to his question. And we actually settled on 15 years in the future,
Okay.
not 10. And we wrote for the first time something that's basically like the visioning process that we now use that you're asking about. And we called it Zingerman's 2009 because it took a year to write it. So it was 94 when we wrote it. And it's basically a 6-page description, or it's not basically, it is a 6-page description of what our organization would look like and feel like in 15 years. So it's not a prediction. It's essentially visualizing, imagining, describing the future that you want to create. So it's not an analysis of the marketplace and this is what we forecast consumers will want in 2009 or whatever. This is how we want the people who work here to feel about working here. This is how we want the town to feel. This is roughly the size, because it's not critical exactly to the penny, but like we knew we didn't want to open a chain of 1,000 Zingermans. We also knew we wanted to grow. We knew we wanted one deli and keep that uniqueness. How do you grow and do, so we basically designed a future that would account for all that. And that vision is essentially what we created, which is this community of businesses where we would have all these separate Zingerman's businesses, all located here in town. I'm not judging others, but I feel really strongly about doing business in the community. You kind of referenced this, in the community in which we live, so that we're physically present, not because you have to keep your finger on everything, but I just think I'm a big believer in ecosystem. And I think I think it's different when one is part of the ecosystem than when one is pulling levers from New York City over what to do in Nebraska. It kind of loses that connection. And we knew we wanted to create, like I said, something special and do it as one organization. So there are all these semi-autonomous businesses, but we have one overarching organization. And we knew we wanted partners in each business so that there would be that ownership mentality that anybody who owns their own business knows is different than being employed by a nice boss. As Paul always says, there's sense of ownership and there's ownership, and sense of ownership is when payroll's coming due and there's not enough money and the employee says, man, I feel bad for Ari and Paul. I wonder what they're going to do. And ownership is when you're like calling every relative you have trying to drum up $2,000 to make payroll. So we wanted real owners with real equity, emotional equity and financial equity. And that's what we created. And the process itself, which is, days worth of training, but comes out of work that a guy named Ron Lippitt did here at University of Michigan in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. He called it preferred futuring or positive futuring. And essentially it was to get people out of the mindset of fixing problems, which is reactive and well-intended, but ultimately doesn't help because you're enmeshed in what's wrong. And to put your mind and yourself into the future of your choosing and stop trying to don't start from where you are, but start with what Stephen Covey would always call the end in mind. So imagine the future you want. And it's a process, as you and I talked about on the phone a couple of days ago, or yesterday, whatever it was, that really, it's a different way of approaching life and the world. So it's not just for your business. Once you really learn the process, most of us who work here have used it to, in our personal lives, we use it for big events we have coming up. If I have a very difficult conversation that I need to or going to engage in, I might write a vision for how it's going to go. I've done some talks where I was very anxious and I wrote a vision, and then I decided to read the vision from the stage to the audience, because then in a good way, it gets people on board and it's being vulnerable in a healthy way.
Absolutely.
And I think Mara actually wrote a vision for the job that she has, which didn't exist before she wrote it. So it's a universal tool that ultimately, through neuroplasticity, which is brain change, really changes the way you look at things.
I really like what you said about the flavor, or the vision is like what you want, how you want it to feel. So basically the sense that people get, and that also you get from your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. I mean, anybody who runs marathons, like I'm an introvert afternoon anarchist, slow runner, so I don't run races, but people who run races, like they all imagine finishing. Every athlete that you admire that did great things. They imagine winning the championship. They imagine winning the gold medal. They imagine whatever it is. So it's a process that every child, I would suggest, knows how to do. Your kids, when you get home, might have turned your living room into a restaurant. They didn't pull permits. They didn't do any business case. They just did it, right? And the next day it might have turned into something else. But the point is just that this ability to imagine something meaningful and special is a natural human process. But there's so much social pressure and family pressure, et cetera, that's well intended, but it teaches us to conform instead of to create. And this is we have taken what Ron Lippitt did and turned it into a very teachable recipe that we teach to the staff here. We teach, I was just working earlier today with a very large nonprofit that's doing some of this work with us. So it's a tool that can change lives. It changed mine. I started very skeptical, by the way, I'll say.
You mean you started very skeptical with
about visioning.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit the convert that had my mind changed.
Well, maybe now this is a good time to talk about energy management.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's amazing, and how we do that and how it can impact. Something I'd also say is that these natural laws, I love how you call them natural laws, because they're not just, as you already said, not just for business, they're for our personal lives, including our family and our partnerships, and they go beyond just work. And so the energy management, I think I love that. So
yeah, the thing of the natural laws is essentially they're like gravity. They're just universal truths. And the key is that they can be, how you use them can be applied in each of our individual situations. So it's not I'm not going to suggest to anybody on here how to do it. It's just the reality of all of our lives. If you don't have a vision of where you're going, it doesn't mean everything's going to fall apart. But the odds of creating the life that you really want, either for you individually, your significant other, your family, or your organization, is the odds go down a lot. And I would suggest that a lot of people on here started their own business. They had a vision of what they wanted. And a lot of times, like Paul and I did, by 93, we had fulfilled it. We weren't done. We weren't rich. We weren't retiring, but we had basically fulfilled it. And we use the metaphor of cathedral building in the context of people want to be part of something greater than themselves, which does boost energy, which I'll get to in a sec. But the story of, which I didn't make up, so people may have seen it elsewhere, but of the guy who goes to Milan in Italy to the construction of the cathedral there. If anybody's been, it's quite an amazing edifice. And he's walking along the site, and he comes to the first guy working. He says, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm laying stone." And he comes to the next one and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." And I would suggest all of us, you and me and everyone, want to be part of something greater than themselves. And we all want to understand how our small piece of the work is contributing to this other thing. And so that's really what the vision is. And that midlife stage, I'll suggest, is a little bit like in your world, the cathedral got built, but the work crew keeps coming. And they're getting paid, so they just start adding stuff on, and it might not have been the way you designed it, but they got to keep working. So pretty soon they add another story, and then they add this, and the elegance of the work that you all did originally gets lost. So anyways, energy goes up, I will say, as a preface, when we're working on something we believe in. So much of the world is stuck in jobs where they have been disconnected from the meaning of their work, where they've been disconnected from the end user. I mean, I would imagine for you all, when you get to see the look in the family's face when the work, which I'm sure wasn't easy for them and for you, but when it's completed and the feeling that they have, and when we never get enough of them, I'm sure you or us, but when you get those notes and they're like, "I just want to tell you that kitchen work you did, as much as I made it as hard as it was, it's really changed our life, and we're relating better to our kids because there's more light in, whatever it is, like those are the things that make it worthwhile." And so energy shifts with that. Energy in particular, I guess I'll say about natural laws, my belief is when we honor nature, whether that's on the planet or human nature, that energy flows better. So if people look down that list, I mean, if we're doing those 12 things, then our human energy will be more engaged. And I've written a piece called The Energy Crisis in the Workplace, which I believe is what happens when we violate those natural laws. We create an energy crisis because people disengage, they become apathetic and cynical. We teach energy management inside the organization. We teach it to all the staff. It's a common term. I know from the outside it can sound kind of weird or woo-woo, but it's actually super tangible. And in the same way that you can teach design, which is also woo-woo to somebody who doesn't do it, you can teach energy. And I learned it from a friend of mine who would actually be a good speaker for you down the road. Her name is Anise Kavanaugh, A-N-E-S-E, Kavanaugh with a C. And she's written a couple of books with the either good or not good titles for a pandemic. Contagious Culture is the first one. But anyway, we adapted her work to our own. And so we teach energy, and we've broken it out, as we do with so many things, into very teachable models. So if you want, I can go through it real quick.
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay.
I
So
think it's a big part of
it's
what
huge.
we deal with.
It's a big part of life. It's the same at home too. So I mean, the biggest piece, I think, for me and for everybody is just to acknowledge that energy exists. We all have it all the time. It doesn't go away. It may bounce off of somebody and hit you back upside the head. Or if it's good energy, it might create positive outcomes, but there's no such thing as not having energy, because neutral energy, if you're dealing with a client, is essentially passivity, and it's not going to be well received. So we teach 3 elements of energy. The first 2 are kind of clear, but it's still important to honor. And when you're hiring employees, most of them are not thinking about it, but their physical energy, right, which everybody knows kind of the basic things of whether it's working out or hydration, proper sleep, nutrition, etc. The second is you could call it emotional energy or spiritual energy, intellectual energy, mental energy, some version of that. And we teach people. I mean, it's everything that most people on here know. It's connecting with nature. It's whatever sort of spiritual activity resonates for you. I would suggest active learning is essentially like working out for your brain. If people, I'm going to say reading, but it could be books on tape or podcasts or whatever works for people. But if you're not actively engaged with learning, your brain gets out of shape in the same way your body does. It doesn't make you dumb. It just means you haven't read a book in a long time. Music, and being around the right people. So one of the things that an organization like yours, I would imagine, is helping people with is just being around others who share your values and who share your work ethic. Makes it so much easier to sustain yourself when you feel like giving up, which we all do on a bad day. So that's a piece. And then the third one that I learned from Anise, which is the one most of us don't think about, but is hugely important, is what she calls vibrational energy. And that's the energy that people take from us. So it's not what we believe we're doing. It's what everybody around us is picking up. And we all know, if you think on it for 90 seconds, we all know we have brought bad vibrational energy, and we have all brought good vibrational energy. And we all know people who typically have good vibrational energy. Those are the ones, when you're having a bad day, that you call. It's the one that you go to when times are tough, etc. And it could be your mother, it could be your minister, it could be your significant other. A lot of us with dogs, it's very comforting because they have generally good vibrational energy. Then we also know people who, I don't judge for it, and I believe they mean well, but they don't know they're doing it, is that they have this negative dissonance that raises anxiety just being near them. And I've learned enough to know it's mostly their own anxiety being put out into the world. So it's not their intention, but it's still difficult and uncomfortable to be around them. So we teach those 3, and I mean, just like things like breathing, posture, meaningful eye contact, smiling. I mean, these are super simple things, but they make an enormous difference. And then we have 4 simple steps. First is to read it. So we use a 0 to 10 scale. 0 sucks, 10 is awesome. And it doesn't mean you're running around crazy, because that's fast, but it's bad pace. And so it's actually negative energy, even though it's fast paced, right?
Mhm.
And we all know people who are like running from one, I'm sure you have
Right.
people and they're new and they mean well, and they're on a job site and they're racing and it's actually dangerous. So it's not helpful. So good pace is part of that. It's the second piece. So read it, then vision it, back to visioning. At the end of the day, where do you want to be? At the end of a difficult conversation you need to have, where do you want to be? Because if you don't set your intention, you're basically drifting in the waters.
Sure.
The third is to manage it. So everybody's different. I'm an introvert, so I like to go away from everybody. Other people are extroverts. Going alone sends them into a panic. There's not a right or wrong. It's just self-awareness. I can go almost all day and barely eat. Other people got to go every 4 hours. So it's just self-awareness to know what you need. And then the fourth step is to repeat it, because as soon as you get where you're going, some text is going to come through that throws you off, or there's going to be new news about the pandemic that bums you out, or all the things that we're all dealing with. So read it, vision it, manage it, and repeat it. And I think the big piece, and then we can move forward if you want, but is that we made that a job expectation. So good energy is part of the job.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was a huge shift, because if you're an accountant and you're super accurate, but your energy is very negative and dissonant, it's still a job performance problem. So from an HR standpoint, it's no different than coming late to work or whatever. It's very tangible. And because we teach it and it's clear, I think it's made an enormous difference.
So awareness then, awareness of what you are bringing to the table for the team as a whole. And if everyone's doing that, then.
Absolutely.
And as employers, it's a huge responsibility to make an environment for people to feel like they can do that.
Yes, and to state the obvious, which
Yep.
even in our short time, I know you're already thinking, is we as the leaders need to bring good energy, because if I bring negative energy, then it's not reasonable to expect the other people to uphold
Right.
their end of it. Now, on a good team, and Mara, I'm sure, can think of times where I didn't bring good energy, and because people are working together, and we can embrace small bits of our inevitable imperfections. But if every day I'm bringing negative, dissonant, critical, harsh energy to the workplace, that's what's going to manifest. And in the same way, whatever, if you throw a ball against the wall, the harder you throw it, the faster it's going to come back at you. So this helped me enormously. Not like I was trying to bring bad energy or I had terrible energy, but minor improvements make a big difference. And if you think of, like, the client is picking this up, and we all know people buy on emotion and justify on fact. I think it's Maya Angelou said, "I may not remember what you said, but I'll always remember how you made me feel." And so when people feel calm and grounded in your presence, and they're going to go home and they're like, "I don't know, honey, I just feel good about this one." And we've all done it. We've done it with professional services. We've done it with building services. We just feel like this is somebody that we want to work with. And I'm telling you, that's a lot of the energy. So, and it does work at home too. Just saying.
I love that quote. That is such an amazing quote.
Yeah. Totally. It's true.
Well, Melissa Irons, she has a question. She says, Ari, what's your biggest obstacle during the past 1.5 years pandemic? And how did you overcome this? Boy, being in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, it's, well, Melissa, it's not a really great year if you were thinking of opening a restaurant, you might want to wait another year. I mean, what you all do is very hard work. I have friends who do it. What we do is also hard work. So I don't think either of these professions is a quick, easy way to make a lot of money, but I didn't do it to make a lot of money. I did it to create good work and make a living while we were doing it. But I don't know that there's one biggest thing. I mean, I think as Jennifer and I talked about the other day, it's kind of an ecosystem and everything's impacting everything else. I relatively quickly, it's actually a year ago now, I decided that the pandemic was essentially like an earthquake in the ecosystem. It was unexpected. Clearly no one was ready, including the people who were supposed to be ready. We did not have a 12-step pandemic preparation plan here at Zingerman's, and a year of supply of hand sanitizer stashed in our warehouse or anything. So it was like an earthquake. I mean, some businesses were hit super hard. Some essentially across the street were totally fine. Some people physically, emotionally were severely devastated. There was death, and then simultaneously, some people were barely impacted at all. So we've had everything here. Diverse ecosystems are the healthiest in nature, and I would suggest the same in business. So our mail order has had the best year ever, because all of y'all who were staying home and couldn't go visit your relatives for the holidays or whatever are sending gifts like crazy, which is wonderful. Because all our businesses are separate businesses, unfortunately, that does not pay the bills in the other businesses, but it is wonderful. But I mean, we had the horrible experience of furloughing 275 people maybe within 2 weeks, which is horrific. I mean, these are people that I care about, that care about the organization, that gave for years everything they had. And I'm happy that we've been able to bring almost all of them back. But I mean, the financial situation was grim in the first few weeks. I definitely went through maybe I'm going to need to put my house in my girlfriend's name, because I mean, not like I'm broke, but money goes quick when you owe a fair bit, and all of a sudden there's no sales. It's very difficult to pay your debt down. So it was kind of scary. Through everybody, including Mara and Zing Trains, I've banned the word pivot from my conversation, but the adaptations that everyone has made to come up with creative ways to reduce costs where we could, to continue to work with dignity and get through all of this. It's good. I mean, people, I guess I'll say the PPP loans definitely helped us. Let's be clear about natural law number 3. I've been part of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which we finally succeeded after a year this March in getting a restaurant fund into the most recent bill from President Biden, which is awesome. We can't get the money yet, but it's in a fund somewhere. So hopefully in the next month, it'll be accessible to independent restaurants. And then I guess I'll share, because I know Mara, it resonated for Mara, and she put the pamphlet in the link in there. I wrote a pamphlet that came out right after the new year called Working Through Hard Times, Life and Leadership Learnings from 2020, because I wanted to kind of create, I guess, emotional and intellectual memento maybe of the year. And I kind of liked writing it partway through, because everybody writes when it's over, but that's also good. But this was like, we're not done yet. We're only halfway through. But one concrete thing, and I actually will be doing this tonight after we're done here, but I started to send notes out to the staff over email, because I mean, all of a sudden people couldn't see each other. They were used to collecting and gathering, and it was scary for everybody. And so I sent an email one night, and then I sent another one the next night, because things were changing so fast, you all remember, and then another one the next night, and then I just kept going. So these weren't like 3-line notes. I mean, I can write a lot, but these were updates on what was happening in the organization, resources for people to check out, resources for the people who had been furloughed, appreciation, back to connecting people to the impact of their work. So stories from customers, et cetera. And I kept that going for 100 days, 100 nights. Every night I wrote a note. And then when we reopened dining rooms and started huddling, which is part of the open book management in mid-June last year, I switched to weekly, and I'm still going on weekly. But the key of it in this context was I didn't do it with the conscious intention of raising hope, but that's what happened. And I actually have written quite a bit in part 4 of the business book, is a couple essays about how to raise hope, because I've realized it's actually something like energy that we're all around it, but most of us have no clue how to create it. So we might be unconsciously good at it, but we're not teaching it and practicing it. And so I didn't really mean to do it, but it's what happened. And then I realized that through this, I was actually touching on these elements of hope building that I had written about. So all of that, people pulling together. And I guess the last thing I'll say is in the metaphor of ecosystem, as I look at the culture of the organization as the soil, and healthy soil holds together. I mean, if you, like, I grew up in Chicago, so we didn't have soil, we had dirt. And if you pick up a handful of dirt on the playground, mostly, and the wind blows, it just blows off to the winds. But I live with a farmer, and she, you know, she's out there right now working in her farm. And if you go pick up a handful of her soil and open your hand, it's going to hold together.
Yeah.
Because it's moist with generosity, et cetera. So I think that cultures in healthier organizations are still hurt, and people are emotionally reeling or financially challenged, but they hold together much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in good soil, roots go deep.
Yes, they do. And belief system is the roots. And so that's another piece of this. Yep.
That's awesome. She also says, and which, if you could pick one, natural law of business helped you the most in moving through business struggles during this difficult time?
Well, I think the beauty is, I mean, without being flip, you don't have to pick. And I think they all matter. I guess I would say if you wanted to pick one, is pick the one that resonates with you instinctively. Zing our training business where Mara works, they actually, when they came back from furlough, because they went from doing really well to like 0 sales in a week, because our whole business is in-house seminars where people like you all would fly from around the country, and or keynotes where I would be out west speaking to you all in person on stage. And so that completely disappeared. So they wrote a vision, and Mara could put the date in there, but I think like in May, they wrote like a 90-day vision. Mara, correct me if I have it slightly wrong, but a vision for what it would be like to get through those first few months. So again, when you have a picture of the end in mind, okay, good, I got it right. When you have a picture of the end in mind, it's easier to hold course. So the visioning is huge. Mara put a link in there earlier to our 2032 vision, which we had worked on over the previous few years. We were about to roll it out at the end of March 2020 formally. I mean, everybody mostly had seen it already, but we're going to do the formal final rollout, and then of course that didn't happen, and so we just formally rolled it out in January. It didn't really change much because it's 2032. So people are like, well, you're going to have to rewrite it, and I was like, not really. Like, how we want to work together is no different. How we want to relate to the community is no different. And I'm going to choose to believe that by 2032, this will be ancient history, and not in a terrible way, but people move on. And as painful and as much grief and dislocation as has happened, it's happened before. And we've been through 9/11, and we've been through 2009. And when we opened in 1982, interest rates were 18% to the bank. And unemployment was like the highest it had been until now, since the middle of the 19th century. So I don't mean it's easy, but we've been through hard times, and we will go through more. I mean, because these seem to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, April Benninger is saying, or she's asking, during stressful times or high growth, because that also is a very stressful time, we can get buried and our energy is not where it needs to be. What is your advice to handle overwhelm? So being overwhelmed. Yeah.
Well, I wrote a piece that's in the pamphlet, actually, that Mara put the link about that. So Bob Dylan said very accurately that when people are overwhelmed, they don't do very well, which of course you don't need to be Bob Dylan or have a psychology degree to know that. But I wrote this piece, and I realized, like, there's one interesting thing I learned. There's a guy named Edward Sapir, S-A-P-I-R, was a linguist, early 20th century linguist. And he pointed out that the different languages are not just different words for the same thing. They're actually different ways to think.
Yeah.
Right. And I've come to realize that the language that we use has an enormous impact on how we're thinking. And English, not being critical, but there's either you're fine or you're overwhelmed. But there's no like pre-whelmed, I'm slightly whelmed. And so like, we don't even have a language for it. And people, and I'm not saying this critically because we've all done it. But when people say that they're overwhelmed, it's like, it's too late. I don't mean it's hopeless, but essentially it's like, I already fell over the cliff. What do I do? but it's like, if we could just get it in our minds to be self-aware, and I include myself in this, I'm not judging others, but to be like, I'm headed towards the cliff. Let me,
Sure.
you know, Rumi, the Persian philosopher, said, if you're drunk and near a cliff, sit down,
Good
which
advice.
is very helpful advice. And it's helpful in terms of anger management, and it's also helpful in terms of the overwhelm. So when you feel it coming, is to divert, right? Get off the highway for a minute and have a cup of coffee. And whether that's anything from meditation to yoga to calling your friend, you can email me. It's ari@zingermans.com. I'm not joking. Well, I mean, just breaking we get stuck in these emotional loops, and we all do it. And if one of the other things I wrote about was calling friends, and just, I'm big on just picking up the phone and calling people. I do it all the time, and I've done it for years, but now I really started doing it in the pandemic, because if you just talk to the people you work with all the time, I'm sure that's part of what Remodelers provides for you all. Like, if you just talk to your colleagues, your coworkers, your spouse, like, they don't want to hear it after a while, and the energy is whipping around your organization, right? And it's going faster and faster, and more overwhelm is happening. Whereas if you call somebody in a different Remodelers, they just listen. They're like, oh yeah, man, that kind of happened to us too. And yeah, wow, you know, and by the time you're done, it's not like the problem is gone, but we've managed our own energy. And what I wrote in the essay in the pamphlet is, like, I had this call with this good friend of mine out in LA, and she and her partner there have owned restaurants for almost as long as we have. And, you know, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and it's a nightmare, and they're in a similar situation. And I don't know, I just called her to say hi. And so we talking and getting off the phone. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I actually helped you with any of your issues that she was struggling with. And she goes, it doesn't matter. I feel like 20 times better. And I'm like, well, I feel better too. So I think just getting grounded in some way that works. I often go for a run if you can get away for half an hour just to do it. But even 5 minutes of leaving the job site, if I'm freaking out in a meeting, I mean, now they're all on Zoom, but I trained myself years ago to go, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, no one ever argues with you, but it's a way to disengage, because my emotion is getting trapped into, and you know, hooked into a bad place.
Right. And you're breaking the cycle of that. Like you said, the energy flipping around. And yeah, I've also heard, and I think you've actually spoken to this, about being grateful. And when you reach out to someone, telling them how thankful you are for them.
This is the Melissa Kelly from Meadowlark here in town. They're a longtime client of Zing Train, and I think that's how the whole Zing Train Zingerman's Remodelers Advantage connection happened. It's like 10 or 12 years ago when it started. Anyway, she was just in a master class that Maggie Bayless from Zing Train and I were teaching about part 3 of the business book series I did, which is on self-management. And she was in there, and she wrote me a nice email after the course thanking me, and she was great to work with. And so I emailed her back. In the email back, I was like, actually, I'm going to be speaking to a different group out west, you know, given that you're in their industry and I'm not. I mean, what comes to your mind that I should be sure to share with them? And she said the 3 and out rule. So I'm going to honor what she said, since I asked her. And that's kind of what Jennifer's leading me towards anyway. So the 3 and out rule is one of the ways, back to the earlier question, that I made up for myself, because as I became more aware of energy, then I'm like, okay, I'm in a bad place, you know. And how does that happen? You all know, like, you get an email that's a customer complaint. The accountant emails you that the financials look bad for last month. Your significant other had a bad day and they text you. You know, some customer comes and tells you, clearly no one here cares about quality anymore because their last sandwich was terrible. You know, and it's like, I take it personally. It's like, you don't actually know that no one cares about quality, but whatever. But I mean, I can go from like, I'm fine to like, I'm a -10 in literally 3 minutes. And with email and text and whatever, it can happen way faster than it used to. And then I'm like, okay, I got to get out of this bad place, because if I don't, I'm going to then contaminate the energy of the rest of the organization. And if I send one angry email to to a partner team, that now is like spread through the whole organization. So I made up this little thing for myself. It's called the 3 and out rule. It comes from sports. I get up in person. Now you could do it on Zoom or on the phone or in text. And I find somebody and I appreciate them. And it has to be real, not bullshit. And I just tell them, and it could be super simple. Like, it's like, you know, the way you handled that customer last week was so awesome. I'm sure they were having a hard day, but you didn't get sucked into it. Or, you know, the food, the shrimp dish you put out last night was so beautiful, or whatever. Like, it's got to be real. They always react with good energy. I immediately go to a second person and repeat. They also react with good energy. And I immediately, without stopping, find another one and do it. I am not able, stubborn as I am, and I am very stubborn, I am unable to stay in a bad mood in the face of those 3 returns of positive energy. And the quick story is, I was speaking at a food conference. We use a lot of Nueske's bacon, which is wonderful bacon from northern Wisconsin, applewood smoked, awesome. And Tanya Nueske, who's one of the family members who owns the company since the early 20th century. And I'm teaching self-management, and I talk about this. It's gonna make me cry. And there's like 300 people in the audience, and I tell about this technique, and she raised her hand. She goes, "You did that to me." And I'm like, "You're right," because I couldn't find anybody. So I just started emailing a couple people, and they're such a great supplier. And I just emailed her to say, like, "Thank you so much. You guys are super generous. You're so cooperative and supportive of our work." And it had been like 3 weeks before that. And it was just like this moment of where she connected the dots, and it was really amazing.
That's something through this pandemic, the human connection, that we've had to find ways of making it work. And Zoom is one way, email is another, handwritten notes is another. Of course, we want to be together, but at this point, we need to find the silver linings of what we are able to do. And I love that. That's awesome. Really cool. 3 and out.
It works.
Yeah.
Teach
Well, it
it to your
actually looks
kids.
like Melissa knows Melissa at Meadowlark. They met through a Women in Residential Construction conference. And I remember that conference. So that's awesome. They share the same name and they're friends.
Yeah, I'm going to tell her that we met.
Yeah. And Francesca said, surrounding yourself with positive people. It's big. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge.
Mhm.
Emotion has been shown to be contagious. And so it doesn't mean that other people are bad people, but I've learned the hard way. If you hang with negative people, it's very difficult. And I grew up like loving newspapers and all that, and I still will read it, but I really stopped looking because and with all due respect to the people who do that work, it's so negative.
Mhm.
And it's very difficult to be in that negative culture and then go to work and be in a positive space. And I realized, I actually haven't put it in the e-news, but it will show up at some point. But I was like, if you were to transpose that onto our organization, like the headlines every day in our staff newsletter would be like, CEO fails to show up for meeting. Partners clash over future of organization. Should Zingermans have gotten a PPP loan? Cynics are, there's so much negativity. It's not hard. And then think about if that was your daily regimen at work in your company and you were trying to do good work, it's impossible. So really the fact that you all and the people who work with us can stay positive, surrounded by this, unwitting but negative energy is no small achievement.
Yeah. Yeah. Awareness of what back to that, where you need to be aware of what you can stomach at certain times of the day and keep away, take it in, because Nicole and I once were talking about an article that I saw and I only read the headline, and she said, well, because I hadn't had time to read the entire article, and it was very different than the headline. So.
Oh yeah. I've learned enough about beliefs, having written a 600-page book about them, that the word choices in the headline radically alter the perception that people take away.
Yeah. And you do, Mara just put up that you have a weekly newsletter, that there's the link available. And don't forget, you've also been generous to give a 20%, let's see, there's a code inbox for 20% virtual workshops and books and trainings. So appreciate that very much. So people should definitely take advantage of that.
One day you'll come here, or I'll come there.
I hope so. Good grief. Yes. So if I could skip down to number 7 of
Yeah.
the 12 natural laws, it says successful businesses do things others know they should, but generally don't. And I would love for you to speak to that.
Well, if you're on this call, you're already probably doing it, because I could pretty much, I don't know how many people are in your organization, but I guarantee you, if you start asking around, and I'm not cutting on them, there's going to be 25 other ones that were like, yeah, man, I really wanted to go, but oh yeah, I should have gone. Oh yeah, I feel, we all, and none of us get everything done, but the point is just, I have watched, listened, read, and been around people who are doing great things. And this is true of second grade teachers. It's true of athletes. It's true of poets. It's true of builders. It's true in the food business. So, you can pick whatever metaphor you want. Like, I work long days, like most of you probably do. And whatever, I'm on the floor working at Zingerman's Roadhouse almost every night. And it's been obviously weird during the pandemic, but I'm still, so it's like there's a table in the back corner, and they were, their energy was a little weird, and I'm tired and I want to go home. And it's not like I really want to go back over there, but I start to walk towards my coat, and I'm like, I'm just going to be 3 minutes later to go home, and I'm going to go do it. It can be writing an email to thank a client when nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
It can be bringing flowers to your significant other. It can be when it's not your anniversary or their birthday. It can be, try it tonight. It can be, don't tell them I said it. It can be going out of your way to buy a book for an employee as a gift. I tried to do it the other day, just seeking out a younger woman who's doing a really nice job, and just, there's a supervisor posting in the business that she works in, and just saying, hey, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but I think you'd be great at it. I don't know if she's going to apply, but just like that tiny act of, like, she doesn't report to me, she's an hour, but just like showing that you care makes an enormous difference. And like I said, pick any metaphor you want. Michael Jordan, I grew up in Chicago as a big Bulls fan. So, he used to he'd be out there shooting free throws after all the rest of them went home. And he'd be out there before the game, before the rest of them got there. And he was already better than all of them. Warren Buffett, who clearly doesn't need the money, whatever says he reads, I don't remember what the number is, 200 books a year, right? So like, he's not doing it because he's going to go bankrupt if he doesn't read them, but it's just the little extra things. The great teacher rewrites the lesson plan every year, every semester. The one who's not that into it, they just use the same one because no one's really going to notice, so it's doing the little extra things. And from the end of the leader, which is who's on here, I'm not saying this just for you and I to do more. It's really, this whole thing of the natural laws is getting your staff, your team to understand this, because you and I can do a little bit more. But the key is more like, if you have 20 employees and they all do 3 little things a day.
Yeah.
Like, do the math. By the end of the year, it's like thousands of small things that you've done. Right. And when you go back to kindness and generosity, which I wrote about too in the pamphlet, if everybody did, I don't want to oversimplify the complexities and challenges of the country, but if everybody did 3 extra kind things a day,
it'd be pretty tremendous.
Yeah. And it costs nothing. That's the thing. It's actually costing us money not to do it, because people's energy and aggro factor and malice goes up in the absence of these small little things. So it just, they're little things, and we all know in our heart that we should do it. We just, we're tired, and it's legit. But I just try to push myself. And again, it works at home. It's like, if I had a long day and my girlfriend a long day, and I can easily fall into the, like, why do I have to wash this dish? But it just doesn't go anywhere. So it's just like, take a deep breath, wash the stupid dish. Like, we've been together 10 years. It's a tiny speck, and I'm sure she has an even longer list on me. So we're all in it together. And if we just take a deep breath and do the right thing and push ourselves to go beyond, I think that everybody in the ecosystem benefits.
That's awesome. Well, let's see. What else can we talk about?
Anything.
All right. Strengths lead to weaknesses.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Mhm.
So I used to think that my strengths and my weaknesses were like existentially opposed. In my soul, there was this battle going on, and I was just like so hopeful that the strengths would win. And one day it dawned on me that actually whatever you're really great at, it's like a long continuum, which I can't show you on a Zoom screen, but it's a long continuum, and anything you're great at, either as your organization in the marketplace or as an individual, will lead to what you're not good at. It's a continuum. So if you, like at Zingerman's, our strength, one of our strengths in the marketplace clearly is very high quality, artisan, handmade, full flavored food. That's what we do. There's an inevitable and unavoidable weakness in the marketplace. It costs a lot.
Yes.
Now, conversely, McDonald's, and I'm not cutting on it, I went there as a kid. What's their strength? Super cheap,
Yep.
convenient, and exactly the same
Fast.
in McDonald's, whether it's in Everett or
Sure.
Eastern Europe, it's exactly the same taste of the hamburger.
Yeah.
What's the downside? I'm going to politely suggest it probably not the most delicious food you ever ate. And I'm not cutting on the people who work there or whatever, but it's just, this is inevitable. So it's true for us as individuals too. I mean, I can be one. We all know people who, you know, in quotes, they're idea people, right? So we have a million ideas. The downside of most people who have a million ideas is they have a hard time finishing.
Yes.
Okay, then you have the other people who are the finishers and the implementers. You might be one based on your response, and your husband probably is the idea person, if and history is anything. No,
Yeah, I think
it's
that
the other
is
way.
the case.
Okay, I'm merely reading your energy. So it's not a judgment. You need both. But the thing is, I've learned is that the people who are the finishers have just as many ideas as the idea people. It's just they self-manage not to blurt them out because they're too anxious that they won't finish what's already started.
Yeah.
Because they're so committed to finishing. So it's not good or bad. It's just understanding that you can track it and forecast it. And then I would say from a market standpoint, what's really important, it's to be great at something, you need to do something that everybody else isn't doing.
Okay.
Right. And so most of the people on here, I'm going to imagine, are working at the higher end of the quality scale.
Yeah.
In construction.
Definitely.
Right. And so like us, that means natural law number 9, success means you get better problems. It's inevitable if you're charging the right price so that you make your finance work, you're going to get complaints that you're too expensive.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. So the problem is it's a challenge. We want to be responsive to customer comments. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you start to offer, let's say right now you're at a 9 out of 10 in quality, 9 or 10 out of 10. People complain and they want a lesser, I don't need, and now you start to offer 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're happy, but you've actually undercut the integrity of your work because you start to slide back to the middle of the road. And we've all done it at some level, but I would suggest,
or been tempted to.
Yeah, our own belief in our work is diminished. Our integrity with the crew who we sold on quality is diminished. And it's a no-win situation because now the person who you did it for, their cousin comes to their house and finds out what you did it for. Now they want you to do it there too. And now you're in the 6 out of 10 business. So you no longer believe in what you're doing, but it's hard to turn down the work. It's paying some bills. But before you know it, you've lost your own passion and energy, et cetera. So one time I was at a talk, I was listening, not speaking, and Jim Hightower from Texas was the commissioner of agriculture, where they have commissioners there. And he is very funny if you look him up. And I don't know, he gets to this point in the speech and he goes, well, one thing I know, there ain't nothing in the middle of the road but a couple of yellow lines and a lot of dead armadillos. And I'm like, dude, I do not want to be a yellow line or an armadillo. Business, stay out of the middle of the road, because if we're no longer great, Like, we're not going to be cheap enough to be the McDonald's of our industry, but we're going to lose the clients who believed in our high quality integrity. So understanding that going to the edge and not just getting pulled back to the middle all the time is difficult emotionally, but it's really important. And if you're doing the little extra things, natural law number 7, you're actually raising the bar on quality, even though no one's asking.
Middle of the road. Yeah. I've seen
It's
death.
death. It's
Yeah.
death. It looks good for a while, but it's death.
Sure. Wow. Well, in all of this, I can't remember if we're supposed to stop at 5 or 5:30. I don't remember.
Well, I don't care. I'll do whatever you want because you're the client and I'm not bothered. And it's nice talking to you.
Does anyone have any questions? Because there's a lot of really good stuff here, but if you're like me, you're probably just taking it in and processing it all. So, and Katrina says that we end at 5:30, so we can keep going.
We've got plenty of time.
This is fantastic. Good. All right. So I would say that the majority of the people on the call today are business owners with employees. Some maybe have quite a few. We do not have quite a few, but so we're on the lower. However, we want to be drawing and attracting more and more really good people. So number 4, people do their best work when they're part of a really great organization.
Yep. Well, you already know it's true.
Yes.
That's why these are natural laws. It's just understanding that the same player on a bad team will perform at a lower level than the same player on a really good team. And it's just so much easier to push yourself to do great work when the people around you care and are also pushing themselves to do great work. And I'm not in the least suggesting any of you all would have this on your job sites, but I have a friend who I still remember, like when he was 20 and he got a job, this is ages ago, obviously, on a construction thing. And he's like, it's his first day on the job. So he's hustling, man. He's like, not running, but like he's moving fast, man. And this was like an old school construction. And he goes like, this older guy calls him aside at lunch and he's like, son, you better slow down because this is a 2-day job. And at the rate you're going, we're going to only be here for 1 day. Now, I'm just saying, like, if that's the culture and you're 20 and the people around you are twice as old as you and you're new, like, you're going to do what they tell you. I mean, you're not going to like go, we have an obligation to the customer ethical standards, like, you're not going to say that. So people do what the people around them do. And if Michael Jordan was on your basketball team, then you start staying late. And if the next man or woman stays late, then you stay late. And it becomes the culture of what you do. So if everybody around you is managing their energy, it's much easier to manage your energy. Why? Because if I slip, somebody in a caring way will bring it up to me. And we can all talk about it in an overt and caring way without pointing fingers.
Absolutely.
So yes. And Andrew, Andrew, Ron Lippitt has a few books, and I'm not saying this because I wrote them, but I think like what I wrote in part 1 of the book, this is my super destroyed copy that has traveled to like Ethiopia and back, but has the essays about the visioning work that will convey it in a way that's more easily, it's written for people like you and me. And Ron Lippitt's awesome, but it was more academic. So I'm not going to discourage you, but none of them are are going to be like, you'll find them online, I'm sure, because you can find anything online if you look. But and I've read them, but this is more designed for like, how do we use it like now, today in a business with real people.
Gotcha. Yeah. So April says best tactics, rule number 6 or law number 6, best tactics for great performance. What does onboarding look like in your company?
Yeah. So since I'm showing books, this is part 4, Power of Beliefs in Business. Very big. It's a whole subject that completely blew my mind. So beliefs, not talking about religion, sports, or politics, which are also beliefs, but I'm not going there. This is beliefs about human beings, beliefs about how much work is too much work, beliefs about what a good cup of coffee is about, beliefs in yourself, beliefs in your child, beliefs about your significant other, beliefs about ourselves. And it turns out that what we believe is creating 90% of our life. And I don't mean every problem we've encountered, we self-created. It's not that simplistic, but the reality is if you hire somebody and you believe they're not going to do well, it's almost impossible that they'll do well. It's not impossible, but it's almost, because the energy you bring, the messages you communicate will change your relationship with them. And back to what you said about the headline. So if the headline is Billy doomed to fail,
Billy will fail.
Billy will fail.
Yeah.
So anyway, in that book, there's an essay that I wrote about the class called Welcome to Zingerman that Paul or I still teach. I need to schedule one. Thank you for reminding me. To the new staff. It's not on their first day anymore, which actually worked out better because they have more sense of the world that we live in. It's somewhere in the first month or two that they're here because different people start at different days and whatever. But it's a 2.5 hour now on Zoom class where I go through the history of the company because they don't know it. They don't know how you grew up, and it does matter. They don't know why you started, and it matters.
Yeah.
And then we talk about the vision of the business, like the same 2032 vision that Mara put in the Zoom chat of an hour ago or whatever. I don't read it to them, but I talk about why each element matters and what it means to me. We talk about our mission statement, which I used to think was a bunch of bad poetry that got hung on bathroom walls, but I actually believe is really meaningful. And I wrote about that in part 1 of the book also. We talk about our mission and how it relates to them. We talk about our values. And so in essence, I mean, in hindsight, I'm communicating these 12 natural laws more through stories, right?
Yeah.
But it's a huge way, I think, to shape their beliefs. And that's why it ended up in that book, because when an employee's new, they are bringing their beliefs. They're bringing beliefs that their parents taught them when they were 2. They're bringing social beliefs. They're bringing beliefs they got from their friends as a 7-year-old. They're bringing beliefs they got from the news or from the athlete they admired or whoever. When they're new, we have a chance to somewhat, not fully, but somewhat impact those beliefs more than once they've been there for a while. And if we don't shape the beliefs, they're going to get them shaped by the other people. And I will just say from years of doing this, the power that's in that conversation is huge. And in that class, I mean, after doing the intros, I start by having everybody go around and tell their story. Like, who are they? Why are they there? Like, where did they grow up? What brought them here? You know, and not like a half an hour each, but even just a couple minutes to hear them. And for the owner of whatever we are now, 600 employees, like the founder sits there and talks to them about business philosophy and hears who they are. It blows people's minds.
Yeah.
And the alternative is like, you just kind of go like, well, you've done carpentry before. Do you have any questions? You know, here's my number. Call me if you need, like,
Right.
it's like, I mean, pick whatever metaphor you want. Like, I'm like, they don't just put somebody on whatever team you like, you know, whatever, and send them out on the field or out on the court. Like, they need to understand you know, and I grew up in Chicago. So like, what's the history of Bears football and what's the Bears ethic? And, you know, there's a story behind it and an ethical grounding in it that we want to give them. And it's, with all due respect to the HR people who can do that, it's not the same. So everybody's different. We're bigger than a lot of you all, but still, I just think going through where you're going, why you're going there, who you are, revealing yourself as an imperfect human and honoring who they are makes an enormous difference.
Yeah. And the strengths that they're going to bring.
Yep.
Absolutely. You talked about an employee who you suggested that they look into a position, a supervisory position.
Yep.
So do you know offhand how many people in your organization continue to move up through the ranks and stay there for, you know, is it just a summer job? Or I have a funny feeling it's so much more than that.
Well, we have everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're imperfect too. We're really short staffed right now. So there's a lot of unemployment, but nobody coming in for jobs. I don't know how it is out there. So, you know, we've got it all. We got the people who said they were going to be there for 5 years and quit the next day with no notice. I'm sure that's never happened to any of you. We have people like Mara and me who came for a short time and we're still here, you know, so I think that we have a lot of that, and we certainly have turnover because it's an industry that's known for turnover. But ours is like half the industry. Well, I don't know right now with all the craziness of the pandemic, but in general, ours has been about half of the industry norm, if not less. So there's, without question, there's people who came here to get a part-time job. I'm going to go to the Roadhouse. Lisa Schultz is the GM there. She started 15 years ago as a server. I doubt she had any sense of what she was going to do in her life, and she didn't need to worry about it. She was, I don't know what she was, 23, you know, and I hope now she'll be a partner in another year, you know, so it's,
Wow.
we have a fair bit of that as well. So we got the whole mix. And when you get 600 people, there's a lot of range for variability, but in general, we want to create what I call good work. I wrote about it in part 2 of the book on leadership. And it is really to create meaningful work that people care about and that they feel like they can go after the life of their choosing and participate in designing that life. And I think I believe that's a rare opportunity. And I believe that it offsets, every job has its downsides. You know,
Sure,
there's no
of
perfect
course.
job. And
Yeah.
and when people get in one for a while, they start to see the grass is greener and yada, yada, yada. But if people can participate in a way that taps their emotional and intellectual abilities and allows them to go after what they believe in, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are just a little shy of 5:30. I thank you so much for this conversation, and I love that you wanted to have a conversation. So appreciate it very much. And something tells me that we'll be extending another invite to come back, and because we definitely want to hear more. There's so much to say. I love how you wrote the book before the pandemic was over. You wrote it in process. You hadn't figured it all out, but yet you put it out there for people to encourage. And I think that would be just, it's, you know, there will be more challenging things down the road, whatever they may be. And appreciate everything that you put in with all of your books and pamphlets and information and the whole program that you have set up. It's excellent.
Well,
So,
well, we're all in it together, and part of the ecosystem model is really you all are part of our ecosystem too, and we're part of yours. And so that's one of the upsides of technology, is it allows us to connect in meaningful ways. And so in the same way that Melissa Kelly could share advice from me about sharing with you, and that I can connect back with Melissa Irons there. And now, you know, it's a wonderful thing. And so the more we all connect, I think that, as you said, the connections are so important. And I think it does create a healthier ecosystem for all of us. So please seriously reach out. I'm happy to answer questions. Mara, thank you for doing your awesome usual work in the chat.
amazing.
She's like the DJ throwing stuff in there all the time and spinning the records. But whatever we can do, please reach out. And the better you do, the better we do. So we're all in this together. And there will be I am a history major, and so you jokingly you said 19, or by mistake said 1918, but that is when the Spanish flu pandemic happened. And I guess I'll just say, like, one of the first things as a history major I did is like, okay, I don't know what the heck a pandemic even is. So I don't even know what the word means, but I'm going to go back and start learning what happened. And I will just say that the cycle is about the same. It took about 18 months. And as somebody reminded me early on in the pandemic, and they're like, do you know what came after the Spanish flu? And I'm like, no, I don't have a clue. And they're like, the Roaring 20s.
Yep.
So if we can get through this, which I think we can, believe we can, then good things will happen. And
that's right.
And we can see each other in person, and
Yep.
do good
Well,
work
we're in
together.
Seattle, and the sun, as you can see, the sun has been shining. So
Yeah, well, here it's dark already, but I'm gonna go work on my weekly note and get that out tonight for the
that
staff.
is
So
fantastic. That is actually really inspiring.
thank you.
Weekly email. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ari.
My
And
pleasure.
thank you, Mara, and to your entire team, because I know there's a lot of amazing people that you represent. So appreciate it very, very much.
It's always a group effort. So thank you. And be well, everybody, and be safe. And
You as well.
as I say in a lot of the notes when I ended, be kind.
Yep.
And
I love
I
it.
look forward to talking to you all again soon.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
And let's see, I guess I don't know where my notes went now, but thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our sponsors. Without you, we would have a really hard time doing this. So I hope everyone has, as Ari said, has a safe and wonderful rest of your day and week. And yeah, be kind. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.